Nice and foggy this morning. Lots of people making right turns on red in front of me. Yeah, I just saw a little video this morning. Didn't really have any details about Mark Thornton, the guy who does Every Man Has a Story over in the Philippines. Supposedly had a massive stroke or something. Was in the hospital. I only found this one video about it where, of course, the comments were the most interesting part. You know, someone in the one video, someone was saying how his young wife, you know, whom he just had a baby with recently, didn't have access to the funds and stuff. So I don't know how anybody would know that. Does that mean that he was keeping her from being able to access the money without him being there? Yeah, I don't know. I just don't know if that's just somebody making a supposition or what, you know, which happens a lot. And then, of course, you get all the comments where, what, after all those videos he made talking about how you need to plan everything, did he really not leave her with enough money to get by and all of that? You know, make sure your young wife is set up financially so when you're not here anymore. But it's interesting. Don't know what their situation is. You know, if she gets any kind of, you know, maybe Social Security or something, probably with, you know, with him being an American citizen and having a little child, you think the kid at least would be entitled to some kind of benefits. So it's hard to tell how that all works. But it brings up a lot of interesting questions. You know, we've been talking lately about retirement and when you retire. I know he said before he had, you know, like a really major bypass surgery and stuff. I don't know if that was back maybe in his 50s or whatever. And all of that. So he's had issues before. But you do hear about this occasionally. The guys go over there and they have these, they have young kids and stuff, and then they have a massive stroke, and you know, the kids don't have any money. They don't have any way of getting any kind of funds. They're over there in the Philippines broke. No way to get any good care unless they get back to America. Man. So I don't know. It's it makes you think every time you hear about an incident like that. All those questions that we always talk about with making sure that, you know, you've got enough to go on, especially if you're going to have a wife and you have a young kid or something. They need to have some way of having some money when you're gone. Have to have some way to take care of them, you know. And you never know when something's going to happen. A lot of people have shit like this happen and they don't really even have any kind of warning signs. Though he said, you know, in his one recent video I saw, he talked about how, you know, we usually know how we're going to go eventually. He figured with him it'd be some kind of a heart issue, you know, since he's had previous issues with that. And that all just adds another layer to the question of moving to another country when you retire. You know, especially something like strokes. That's the kind of thing where how you come out of it really depends on whether or not you get immediate medical care when it happens. And as many people have pointed out, in most places in the Philippines, having access to really super high quality immediate medical care for something like that might be an issue, you know. So that's yet one of the other many things you have to think about You know, you can't really plan your whole life around, man, I need to be within, you know, a mile of a hospital if something goes wrong. Otherwise, you would never be able to go anywhere or do anything. But in terms of where you're going to be settled down long term, obviously, it's kind of comforting once you get to a certain age to know that there are facilities around that can keep you going. Because a lot of people have these kind of acute incidents, and once it's resolved, they're still around for another 10, 15, 20 years, you know? It's not like, oh, well, you know, who cares? I'm going to die anyways. A lot of times, once you get through an incident like that, you've still got a lot of life left, you know? So, yet another thing to think about. This incident, you know, it brings to the forefront a lot of different questions all rolled into one. Having a young wife, a kid who's very, very young, less than a year old, and how can you prepare for an incident like that? How are you allocating your money? If you have a limited amount of money, what are you spending it on, you know? Is it smart if you're living in the Philippines and you have a super limited budget? Is it really smart to be spending $600 a month on a beach house instead of, you know, $150, $200 a month on something smaller and you know, a little bit more of a cushion that it leaves you in your budget for things? Because if you're spending $600 a month on a place, let's say, instead of $200 a month for something that's nice and comfy and more than adequate for your needs, that's $400 a month you could be saving, $4,800 a year, you know, that you could be putting aside for some kind of a fund for emergency use, things like that. There's all these little questions that you need to think about. Obviously, anytime you move to a foreign country and you have an extremely limited budget, those are the kind of decisions that you have to make, you know, in advance of having some kind of a serious issue. You don't just want to spend every single penny that you can, that you have coming in. You need to think about having some kind of a cushion someday. You know, people talk about having an emergency fund or something, and that's actually should be a part of your monthly budget, putting something aside for that, because you're in a foreign country where basically you're on your own. It's not like being an American citizen here in America and having access to really good emergency medical care and ambulances that'll come flying off to catch you with the sirens going and make everybody get out of the way while they're getting you to a hospital or something. It's a totally different situation. Over there, you know, how do you get to the hospital even if something happens? If you don't have a car, or one of your neighbors or friends doesn't have a car, what do? You know, your wife have to go out and flag down a tricycle out at the road and then load you into a tricycle to try and get you to the hospital or some medical place while you're having a stroke. Those are all things that we have to think about. On the other hand, once again, it's all about living, you know. None of us can spend our whole life just planning every single thing around the possibility of some kind of medical emergency, because then you would never do anything. Think back to the old days, the mountain men out living in the mountains on their own, you know, trapping stuff and trading pelts and stuff for food that they need and living off the land on their own. Back in the days when there was no rapid transit to get anywhere, and you were miles and miles, maybe tens or hundreds of miles away from any kind of decent medical care, you know? So that's always been a part of life. If you want to live the adventure and see things that not everybody else is seeing, and go to places that not everybody else gets to go to, and have those memories in your life. You can't just be sitting around a major metropolitan area 100 feet away from a hospital, you know? So how do you want to live your retirement? That's all a part of the question too. It's not just about the money you have. It's about what kind of life do you want to live? What do you want to see and do? Because if you're just sitting around, you know, making sure you're close to some medical center, are you really even alive anyways? If that's your only concern in life, you're not living, you know? Food for thought. Every time you hear one of these things, it makes you start thinking about all those questions. And I'm sure we'll see hundreds, if not thousands, of videos from all the Philippine YouTubers over there talking about the situation. And certainly if all of that's true and he did have that kind of situation, you know, I'm sure we're all hoping the best for him. There might be a few people who aren't, but you know, you've always got assholes out there in any community. There's a lot of these guys fighting with each other over there in the Philippines expat community, so, you know, getting into fist fights and Dumageddon and shit like that. So, but you got to give everybody a shot and hope the best for everyone.